and then we got married, and they drafted me back into the Army, in spite of the fact that I already had some service time in. And in spite of the fact that I was married, and in spite of the fact I had a baby on the way. So anyhow, I ended up over in Europe and spent a couple years. I was reassigned to the Air Corps, and I was with a printing unit all the time I was in. And I took, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, and then discharged back on, where was it? Fort Benning, Georgia. I think I took my discharge there before I came home.
Dean was, we were married in January, and Dean was born
9 months later.
no, 9 months, 4 days later. People were counting.
Our friends didn't count, but you know, the other ones did.
That was in January, and then Tom left in February, or March. For service. And he was going back and forth here and there in the States, and so he was down in Florida. And so at that point, Dean was born in October, and after Christmas, I flew out there with Dean, and that was an experience for me because I had never flown before, and having a child. And I was nursing him, and he seemed to be so fussy that I decided to quit nursing him. So I'm flying in this plane. I'm going down to Chicago, and I get to Chicago, and I went to the restroom because I had to take care of Dean, and I had to also go to the desk and get my flight to Winter Park or Orlando. And I was beside myself because I thought, geez, have to get out there. So at that time, there wasn't the scare that you have today as far as leaving your child. But there was a woman in there, a very nice lady, and I said, would you mind if I leave my son here and go out and get my flight arrangements? Well, by the time I got out there, it was too late, and I had my eye on the door where she couldn't go anywhere with him. By the time I got out there, I was bounced, and I couldn't leave for another hour. And they didn't send me to Orlando. I had to go to Miami. Well, I had my bowling dress on, which was a cocoa-colored dress. And by the time I got to Miami, I had 2 great big wet circles here. And I was so embarrassed. I mean, I had a coat, a long spring coat, and here I am putting this coat on to get out in Miami, and girls were walking around with their bikinis and strapless dresses, and there I am with this coat on. And I sat the whole time in the lounge, in the women's lounge, waiting for my flight to go up to Orlando. And this is my first flight. So we get up to Orlando, and I thought, gee, this is strange. I was on a smaller plane. I thought, gee, this is strange. I'm feeling kind of oozy. Here we've been circling the airport. We couldn't land for weather conditions or whatever, and we kept circling and circling. Finally, I landed there, and we had a cute little house next to was it Fuller's, older couple. And it was so neat because they were moving in an orange tree. They were moving it in and plopped it in the ground, and there was oranges hanging on the tree. And I thought, oh, that was so special to have something like that in the yard. But I was there for a month and waiting for the shipment of Dean's crib, and it never arrived. By the time I had to go back home, he was sleeping in a drawer.
Oh, in a drawer, yeah.
Yeah, he was sleeping in a drawer. And so I went home, and I was home, about 3 weeks, and they delayed his departure. He was supposed to depart to go to Europe, And they didn't, so I thought, oh, good. So I flew back down, and this time we stayed in
An apartment
in a
in Winter Park.
in Winter Park, and there he slept in a closet because
We still didn't have his
we
bed.
still didn't have his bed, so he brought a little bed or a mattress from
From the base
base.
and put it in the closet with sliding doors.
And so we left it open just a little bit, otherwise he'd crawl out and we didn't know where we were going to find him.
Yeah, so he to this day, he claims that his psyche was destroyed because we kept him in a closet.
But we bought a stroller that collapsed, and we used to take
Yeah,
him on a
take him
bus.
walking.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
all the palmetto bugs. But anyway, that's where that was with, and then Tom went in service, and
Well, I was shipped overseas to
yeah,
France.
and
So,
I went and lived with my mom for a while, but then I moved in with my sister, and she lived
Margaret.
about a mile from my mom's, and I lived there, and she had a son that was a year older than Dean, and yeah, I remember she had a washing machine that every time I would go down there, I'd get a shock from it. And then we used to hang our clothes on the line when it was cold outside with white gloves, and it was freezing.
I didn't know that. You had it rough.
Yeah. But yeah, I stayed there until Tom came home.
Yeah. Well, I stayed there too because we had bought a house.
We shopped for to rent. We were going to rent, and we just
Yeah.
couldn't find what we wanted, and so we ended up buying a house in Crystal. It was being built, and so we had to pick out everything.
And that's where the girls were born.
Yeah, all 4 girls were born there, and the house was a rose-colored one on the outside.
Pink on the inside.
I worked until my 8th month of pregnancy with Title Insurance
Yeah.
downtown, and he wrote and wanted to know if I wanted to come to Europe after I had Dean, because he was sergeant then, and he could, if he signed up, he could stay longer, and then I could go to Europe. And I said, oh, I don't know. I've been saving money here for when you get out. I mean, then when he got out, he says we could have went to Florida and started there, because we both enjoyed being on our own, away from things, and just, we could pretend growing up by ourselves without having somebody.
But I had, all the time I was in, I was sending money home,
Yeah, I was saving.
and she was saving it all. So by the time I got home, she had saved enough money for a down payment on a house.
And I didn't have to pay anything where I was and staying.
So that's how we got started on our first house.
When he came home on leave, he drove all night
Oh, yeah.
All
I was
night.
down at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
to come home.
Actually, I took basic training out at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and then we were transferred down to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Yeah.
One of the guys had a car down there, and he lived in Minneapolis and wanted to come
So-
home for the weekend.
So Tom drove all the way, and then the guy took the car, and Tom got on a bus. And or streetcar? That was.
On a streetcar, yeah.
And who should he run into but my sister-in-law, Bev,
And Margaret.
and Margaret, my sister. And what a reunion on that bus, or streetcar.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was something.
yeah. They saw me before you did.
Oh, and then tell him now when you got out of service and came back from Europe
Oh, geez.
at the train depot in Chicago. We were supposed to meet our 2 friends that we kept company with down in Florida. They had a
They're
little girl,
Yeah, they're a married
Robbie,
couple.
married couple, and they had a little girl the same age as Dean.
Yeah,
And she was supposed to meet us. If they lived in Nebraska, she was supposed to meet us there with her and meet her husband. She couldn't make it because they had an awful storm, and she couldn't come. So there I was by myself, waiting for Tom.
Oh, well, yeah, and of course, the Bob, her husband, just kept on going then. But we're in Grand Central Station in Chicago, and she's on the far end, and I'm over here, and we see each other, you know. And you see these pictures in slow motion to meet one another. Didn't happen that way. She's walking towards me, and I'm walking towards her, and we get within eyeball distance. She says, "Hi." You know, "Hi." I said, "Hi." She hadn't, you know, we hadn't seen each other for a couple of years.
Well, it was, I
Whatever
think,
it
a
was.
year.
Okay. Hi. So we get along fine, though. So we spent the night in Chicago and in a dirty old hotel room, drafty. Caught the train the next day
Yeah.
and came home.